Billionaire's maid was framed for stealing his mother's necklace. But he saw everything. Hook. Open your bag, Grace. The room became so quiet that Grace Bennett could hear the antique clock ticking across the marble foyer. 20 pairs of eyes were fixed on her. Housekeepers. Kitchen staff. Security. The estate manager. And standing at the bottom of the sweeping staircase was Daniel Hawthorne, billionaire hotel owner and the man Grace had slowly, dangerously begun to love. Grace looked down at the worn brown handbag she had carried to work every morning. I don't understand. Victoria Sinclair folded her arms. If you have nothing to hide, then open it. Grace looked at Daniel. For weeks, he had been the one person who made her believe that perhaps her life was finally changing. Now his expression revealed nothing. Her fingers trembled as she opened the zipper. She reached inside. Her hand touched something cold. Grace froze. No. Slowly, she pulled it out. A diamond necklace glittered beneath the chandelier. Someone gasped. Mrs. Reynolds covered her mouth. Grace stared at the necklace. She had seen it only once before. It had belonged to Daniel's late mother. It was worth nearly $500,000. And somehow, it was inside Grace's bag. I didn't take this. Victoria gave a quiet laugh. Of course you didn't. Grace's eyes filled with tears. I swear I have never touched this necklace. Then she looked at Daniel. Please. Daniel finally stepped toward her. But he wasn't looking at the necklace. He wasn't even looking at Grace. He was staring directly at Victoria. Because 3 hours earlier, a security camera Victoria didn't know existed had recorded someone entering the staff room. Someone opening Grace's locker. Someone placing the necklace inside her bag. And Daniel Hawthorne had already watched every second of it. What Victoria didn't know was that this wasn't the first time Daniel had quietly watched someone underestimate Grace Bennett. And before the day was over, everyone in that mansion would discover exactly why the billionaire had trusted his housekeeper long before she ever trusted him. But to understand how Grace ended up standing in a mansion accused of stealing a fortune, we have to go back 3 months. To a morning when she didn't even have enough money to buy breakfast. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. 3 months earlier, Grace Bennett woke before the alarm. She always did. At 5:17 every morning, her eyes opened automatically. Not because she was well rested. Because worry had trained her body better than any alarm clock ever could. The apartment was still dark. Rain tapped softly against the kitchen window. Grace remained beneath the thin blanket for several seconds, listening. No footsteps. No coughing. No movement from the bedroom across the hall. Good. Maya was still asleep. Grace slipped quietly from bed. The apartment was small enough that she could cross it in less than 20 steps. 2 bedrooms. 1 bathroom. A kitchen with a refrigerator that hummed louder every month. And a living room where the couch had been repaired so many times that Grace had stopped remembering its original color. But it was home. For now. Grace opened the refrigerator. Half a carton of milk. 3 eggs. A little butter. 1 apple. She stared at the food. Then she looked toward Maya's bedroom. Breakfast it is. 20 minutes later, 16-year-old Maya walked into the kitchen wearing her school sweatshirt. You're not eating? Grace slid the plate toward her. I ate already. Maya looked at the single dirty pan. Then at Grace. You're a terrible liar. Grace smiled. And you're going to miss the bus. Grace. Maya. There were 3 eggs. Yes. There are 3 eggs on my plate. Grace reached for her coffee. Congratulations. Your math teachers are doing excellent work. Maya didn't laugh. Instead, she picked up the fork, cut 1 egg in half, and placed it on the small plate in front of Grace. Grace sighed. Maya. You're eating. I'll get something later. With what money? That silenced her. Maya immediately regretted saying it. I'm sorry. No. Grace reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Don't apologize for knowing what's happening. Their mother had died 4 years earlier. Cancer had taken her slowly enough for both girls to understand what was happening, and quickly enough that neither had been prepared. Their father had disappeared from their lives years before that. So at 29, Grace had become everything. Sister, guardian, provider, emergency contact, parent. She had dropped out of community college during her final year to care for Maya. She told herself she'd go back. Someday. Someday had become 4 years. Grace forced herself to eat the half egg. See? Happy? Moderately. Maya smiled. Then she noticed the stack of envelopes beside Grace's purse. One had final notice stamped across the front. Is that the electric bill? Grace turned it face down. It's handled. Grace, your job is school. And yours is apparently lying to me. My job is making sure you get opportunities I didn't. Maya looked at her for a long moment. You know what I want? What? For you to get opportunities too. Grace's smile weakened. One of us at a time. No. Maya shook her head. Both of us. Grace looked at her little sister and wondered when the child she had protected had learned how to see straight through her. She stood. Come on, bus. At the door, Maya hugged her. Good luck today. Grace had 3 interviews. A hotel laundry position, a grocery store, and a cleaning company. 3rd time's the charm. You said that yesterday. Yesterday was practice. Maya grinned. Then today you're going to crush it. Grace watched her disappear down the stairs. Only after Maya was gone did Grace take the final notice from the table. Electricity disconnected Friday. Today was Tuesday. She had 3 days. Okay. Grace whispered it to the empty room. 1 step at a time. By noon, 2 interviews had become 2 rejections. At 2:40, the 3rd became another. We've decided to move forward with another candidate. Grace smiled because she had become very good at smiling while being disappointed. Thank you for considering me. Outside, she sat on a bus stop bench. Cars passed. People hurried around her. Her phone buzzed. Maya, how'd it go? Grace stared at the screen. Then typed, still waiting to hear. Another lie. She hated how easily they came now. Not selfish lies. Survival lies. The kind you told because someone you loved was too young to carry your fear. Grace Bennett? She looked up. A gray-haired man stood outside a small cafe behind her. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. Then, Mr. Alvarez? His face brightened. I knew it. Grace stood. Samuel Alvarez had owned the neighborhood bookstore where Grace spent half her childhood. She hadn't seen him since before her mother became sick. He hugged her. Look at you. Grace laughed. I'm not sure there's much to look at today. His smile faded slightly. What happened? Nothing. Grace. He pointed toward his cafe. I knew you when you were 12 years old. You couldn't lie then either. 10 minutes later, Grace was sitting with a bowl of soup she hadn't ordered. I can't pay for this. Samuel waved her off. Then wash 1 dish. Mr. Alvarez. Eat. She ate, and perhaps because she was tired, or because someone finally asked without needing anything from her, Grace told him everything. Not dramatically, just honestly. Her mother's illness, leaving college, raising Maya, losing her previous housekeeping position when the hotel changed contractors, the applications, the bills, the fear. Samuel listened. When she finished, he leaned back. There may be something. Grace looked up. What? A client comes in here most Wednesdays. He lowered his voice as if sharing a secret. Margaret Reynolds. Grace waited. Samuel smiled. You don't know that name? Should I? She manages Hawthorne House. Grace almost laughed. The Hawthorne House? Yes. Everyone in the city knew the Hawthorne family. Luxury hotels, real estate, charitable foundations, and Daniel Hawthorne, the 38-year-old billionaire, whose photograph appeared in business magazines almost as often as it appeared in society columns. I don't think people like that hire people like me because their cafe owner recommends them. People like what? Mr. Alvarez. Samuel leaned forward. Grace, never decide you're unqualified before someone has the chance to meet you. She looked down. He continued. Mrs. Reynolds mentioned they're looking for additional household staff. I told her I knew someone. You already told her about me? I hoped I'd see you eventually. Grace laughed softly. You haven't changed. Neither have you. I've changed a lot. No. Samuel shook his head. Life has happened to you. That's different. Those words followed Grace all the way home. Life has happened to you. That's different. That's Maya nearly screamed when Grace told her. Hawthorne House? Don't get excited. I'm already excited. It's only an interview. With Daniel Hawthorne? Probably an HR manager. Maya grabbed her phone. Do you know how rich he is? Don't. I'm Googling. Maya. Whoa. Grace covered her face. What? He's handsome. Maya. What? I'm making an objective observation. You are 16. I have eyes. Grace snatched the phone. The photograph showed Daniel Hawthorne leaving a charity gala. Tall, dark hair, serious expression, expensive tuxedo. The sort of man who seemed to belong to another universe. Grace put the phone down. I am applying to clean his house, not marry him. Maya smiled. I didn't say anything about marriage. Your face did. For the first time in weeks, they laughed. And that night, when the apartment became quiet again, Grace took her mother's old photograph from her bedside table. I wish you were here. She traced her mother's face. I don't know if I'm doing any of this right. Silence answered. Grace swallowed. But I'm trying. Hawthorne House wasn't a house. It was an estate. Grace stood outside the gates the following morning, wondering whether the security guard might laugh when she gave her name. He didn't. Miss Bennett? Yes. Mrs. Reynolds is expecting you. The gates opened. Grace stared. The driveway seemed to continue forever. Ancient trees lined both sides. Beyond them stood a pale stone mansion overlooking the river. She suddenly became aware of everything about herself. Her inexpensive shoes, the carefully repaired seam on her blouse, the purse she'd owned for 7 years. Don't turn around. She whispered it to herself. You belong wherever your feet can take you. Inside, Margaret Reynolds greeted her. She was in her early 60s, elegant without being intimidating. Grace Bennett. Yes, ma'am. Samuel Alvarez says you are one of the most dependable people he's ever known. Grace smiled. He's biased. Margaret almost smiled. He also said you'd say something like that. The interview wasn't what Grace expected. Margaret didn't ask about polishing silver. She didn't ask whether Grace knew how to fold hotel corners. Instead, she asked, if you discovered another employee had made a mistake that could get them fired, what would you do? Grace thought. Depends on the mistake. Explain. If they hurt someone or did something dishonest, I'd report it. But if it was an honest mistake, I'd help them fix it before I tried to punish them for it. Margaret studied her. Why? Because everybody needs grace eventually. Something changed in Margaret's expression. She wrote something down. Then, why do you want this job? Grace could have said money. She desperately needed it. But something told her Margaret would recognize a rehearsed answer. My sister. Margaret looked up. She's 16. Our mother died 4 years ago. I'm her guardian. Grace paused. She has a chance to become something extraordinary. I just want to make sure money doesn't decide her future before she gets the opportunity to. Margaret closed the folder. Can you start Monday? Grace blinked. I'm sorry? The position is yours if you want it. Grace stared at her. You're offering me the job? I am. Grace covered her mouth. Margaret's expression softened. Yes, Grace. A laugh escaped through Grace's tears. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Thank you. She stood, then stopped herself from hugging the woman. Margaret noticed. Oh, go ahead. Grace hugged her. Margaret laughed. Monday, 7 sharp. I'll be here at 6:50. I believe you. Neither woman noticed the man standing silently in the upstairs corridor. Daniel Hawthorne had been walking toward his office when he heard the laughter. He looked down and froze. Grace. The woman downstairs had changed. Her hair was different. She was older, but Daniel recognized her immediately. He hadn't known her name that night. He had spent years wondering who she was. And now, somehow, she was standing inside his home. "Mr. Hawthorne?" Daniel's assistant approached. "Your call with Chicago is ready." Daniel continued staring downstairs. "Who is that?" "The new housekeeper, I believe." Daniel's eyes remained on Grace. "What's her name?" "Grace Bennett." "Grace Bennett." Daniel repeated the name silently. Then he smiled. For the first time in a very long time, a memory he had tried to bury came rushing back. A hospital corridor, blood on his shirt, a stranger sitting beside him, and a sentence Daniel had never forgotten. But Grace had no idea. There. When she arrived home, Maya knew before Grace spoke. "You got it." Grace laughed. "I got it." Maya threw herself into her arms. "We're not getting our electricity shut off." Grace froze. Maya pulled away. "You knew?" "I saw the letter." Grace started crying. Not graceful tears. Not cinematic tears. The exhausted tears of someone who had been holding a collapsing roof above her head and had finally been told she could put one hand down. Maya hugged her. "We're going to be okay." Grace nodded against her shoulder. "We're going to be okay." Monday morning arrived. Grace stood outside Hawthorne House at 6:48. Margaret checked her watch. 2 minutes earlier than promised. Nerves. Good nerves? Ask me at noon. Margaret handed her a uniform. Simple. Cream blouse. Black trousers. A small embroidered H. Grace ran her thumb over it. "Welcome to Hawthorne House." Grace smiled. "Thank you." Her first morning moved quickly. Guest rooms. Linen closets. Breakfast service. The West Hall. At 9:20 she met Nora, a housekeeper who had worked there for 11 years. At 9:35 she helped one of the kitchen staff carry boxes even though it wasn't her assignment. At 10:10 she found a gold cufflink beneath a sofa. She immediately brought it to Margaret. Margaret looked at it. "Do you know whose this is?" "No. Mr. Hawthorne's." Grace held it out. Margaret didn't take it. "You could have left it on his desk." "I didn't know if someone might think I took it." Margaret studied her, then accepted it. Good instinct. What Grace didn't know was that Margaret told Daniel about the cufflink later that afternoon. He wasn't surprised. Did she know it was mine? No. Daniel looked toward the window. Of course she didn't. Margaret noticed the strange warmth in his voice. "You know her?" Daniel hesitated. No. It wasn't exactly a lie. Grace didn't know him. But he remembered her. Their first real meeting happened that afternoon. Grace was carrying fresh flowers into the library when she turned a corner and walked directly into someone. The vase tilted. "Oh!" A hand caught it. Another steadied Grace. Water splashed across the floor. "I'm so sorry." Grace looked up and found herself staring into the face Maya had shown her on the phone. Daniel Hawthorne. In person, he looked less polished. More human. Tired eyes. Rolled up sleeves. No jacket. "Are you hurt?" Grace blinked. "No, sir." "You're sure?" "Yes." Then she noticed his wet shirt. Oh no. Daniel looked down. "I've survived worse." Grace grabbed a towel. "I should have been paying attention." "So should I." She knelt to wipe the water. Daniel crouched too. Grace stopped. "You don't have to do that. Neither do you. It is literally my job." That made him laugh. A real laugh. Grace stared before she could stop herself. "What?" "Nothing." "You looked surprised." "I didn't know billionaires cleaned floors." Daniel raised an eyebrow. Grace's eyes widened. "I did not mean to say that out loud." His smile grew. "What did you think we did?" "I don't know." "Float?" She laughed. And for a few seconds, neither noticed Margaret watching from the doorway. Daniel handed Grace the last flower. Grace Bennett. Her smile disappeared slightly. "You know my name?" "I make it a point to know who works in my home." That was technically true, but not the entire truth. "Welcome to Hawthorne House." "Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne." Daniel watched her leave. Margaret walked in. That was interesting. Daniel picked up his folder. What was? I've worked for you 15 years. And? I've never seen you help anyone clean a floor. Then today was historic. Margaret smiled. Apparently. Weeks passed. Grace became part of the rhythm of the estate. She wasn't extraordinary because she worked faster than everyone. She was extraordinary because she noticed people. She noticed Nora rubbing her wrist and quietly finished the heavier rooms. She remembered the gardener's birthday. She learned that Margaret took tea without sugar. When a dishwasher named Caleb accidentally broke a crystal serving plate and panicked, Grace helped him gather the pieces before going with him to tell Margaret. You could have let him handle it, Margaret said later. He was scared. That wasn't your responsibility. Grace smiled. Maybe not. Margaret shook her head. You're going to make it very difficult not to like you. Grace laughed. I'm sorry. No, you're not. No. And Daniel noticed. He noticed all of it. Sometimes from across a room. Sometimes through reports Margaret never realized he was listening to so carefully. Sometimes directly. Like the morning he found Grace in the library staring at a shelf. Looking for something? She turned. I was dusting. You've been dusting the same shelf for 3 minutes. Grace smiled guiltily. I was reading the titles. Take one. What? A book. I couldn't. Why? They're yours. Daniel looked around. There are 8,000 books in this room. I promise I won't notice. I would. He studied her. You like books. I love them. What kind? What kind? Anything that lets me disappear somewhere else for a while. Daniel became quiet. What? Nothing. He walked toward a shelf and removed a novel. Try this. Grace looked at the cover. I've read it. Daniel looked surprised. This? 3 times. Impossible. Why? Almost nobody likes this book. I do. Why? Grace thought. Because the main character spends half the story believing strength means not needing anybody. Daniel's smile disappeared. And? She eventually realizes that's not strength, it's fear. Something about the answer landed deeper than Grace intended. Daniel looked at her for several seconds. Interesting interpretation. You disagree? No. His voice softened. I think you might be right. Grace suddenly felt as if they weren't discussing a book anymore. She placed it back. I should finish. Grace. She turned. Take one. This time she did. That. At home, Maya noticed the change first. You're smiling at your phone. Grace immediately put it down. I am not. You are. It's an email from work. Does the email have dark hair and several $billion? Maya laughed. Grace threw a pillow at her. Nothing is happening. Okay. Seriously. I believe you. You clearly don't. Maya leaned closer. Do you like him? Grace's smile faded. That doesn't matter. Why? Because some people live in worlds that don't touch ours. Maya looked around their apartment. You work in his house. I'd say the worlds are touching. That's different. Is it? Grace didn't answer. Because that was the problem. She wasn't sure anymore. Then, Daniel began finding reasons to be home. He postponed lunches. Took calls from his study. Walked through the library at times he knew Grace would be there. Margaret noticed. Nora noticed. The kitchen staff definitely noticed. Grace pretended not to. Until one rainy afternoon. Most of the staff had already left. Grace stood under the covered entrance staring at the storm. You'll be waiting an hour. She turned. Daniel stood behind her. The bus will come. Eventually. I don't mind rain. Neither do I. Thunder rolled. Daniel looked toward the driveway. I'll take you home. Grace laughed nervously. No. Why not? Because my employer driving me home feels complicated. It's raining. You own half the hotels in this state. Everything you do is complicated. Daniel smiled. Fair. Grace checked the road again. Another flash of lightning. Daniel held out an umbrella. Then let me drive you to the bus station. She looked at him. Compromise? Compromise. They walked together. Halfway to the car, the rain blew sideways. Grace squealed. Daniel tried to cover her with the umbrella. It failed. By the time they reached the car, both were soaked. Grace started laughing. Daniel looked at her. What? You. What about me? Your face. My face? You look personally offended by the weather. Daniel laughed. And suddenly the mansion, the money, the rules, all of it disappeared. There were simply two people standing in the rain. Daniel stopped laughing first. He looked at her. Grace felt it too. The shift. Neither spoke. Then his phone rang. Reality returned. Daniel looked at the screen. Grace stepped back. You should answer. He did. But as he drove her toward the bus station, Daniel realized something that frightened him more than any business deal ever had. He didn't want the drive to end. 2 days later, Grace arrived at work to find a small package in her locker. Inside was a book. The same novel from the library. But this copy wasn't expensive. It was old. Used. And inside the cover was a note. Some books are meant to belong to the people who understand them. No signature. Grace smiled anyway. Nora leaned over. Secret admirer? No. That smile says otherwise. Grace closed the book. Across the estate, Daniel received a message. She found it. Margaret. He smiled. But 3,000 miles away, someone else was about to hear Grace Bennett's name for the first time. Victoria Sinclair sat in a Manhattan restaurant across from Olivia Hawthorne, Daniel's younger sister. Victoria had spent 6 years believing she would become Mrs. Daniel Hawthorne. She and Daniel had grown up in the same circles. Their families vacationed together. Their engagement had been discussed before Daniel ever bought a ring. Then Daniel's mother died. Everything changed. He became distant. The relationship collapsed. Victoria moved to New York. But in her mind, Daniel had never stopped belonging to her. So, Victoria said casually, "How's your brother?" Olivia smiled. Different. Different how? Happier. Victoria's wineglass paused halfway to her lips. Really? There is someone. The glass returned to the table. Who? Olivia immediately realized she'd said too much. No one serious. Olivia. She sighed. Her name is Grace. Grace who? I shouldn't be telling you this. Victoria smiled. Then don't. But her eyes had changed. 3 days later, Victoria Sinclair arrived at Hawthorne House. Then, Grace was arranging flowers when the front doors opened. She heard heels against marble. Margaret's voice followed. Miss Sinclair, we weren't expecting you. I enjoy surprises. Grace turned. Victoria was beautiful, elegant, controlled, the kind of woman Grace imagined had never checked her bank balance before buying groceries. Then Daniel entered the foyer. Victoria? She smiled. Hello, Daniel. She kissed his cheek. Grace looked away. Something inside her dropped. Victoria noticed. And in that tiny movement, she understood everything. So, Victoria turned toward Grace. And who is this? Daniel answered before Grace could. Grace Bennett. Victoria tore up and down. The housekeeper. Grace smiled politely. One of them. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. Victoria extended her hand. Victoria Sinclair. Nice to meet you. Oh, I'm sure we'll get to know each other very well. Grace didn't know why the sentence sounded like a warning. But it did. That evening, Victoria found Olivia in the garden. You didn't tell me she worked for him. Does it matter? Yes. Why? Because this isn't Daniel. Olivia frowned. What isn't? Getting emotionally involved with an employee. Maybe he's happy. Victoria stared at her. With a housekeeper? Olivia's expression hardened. With Grace. Victoria laughed. You think this ends well? I think that's Daniel's decision. No. Victoria looked toward the mansion. It isn't. For the next week, Victoria was perfectly pleasant whenever Daniel was present. When he wasn't, she changed. Grace. Yes, Miss Sinclair? Victoria held out a dress. This needs steaming. Of course. And be careful. It costs more than most people make in 6 months. Grace met her eyes. I'll treat it with the same care I give everything in this house. Victoria smiled. I'm sure you will. Later. Grace, champagne. I'll ask the kitchen. I ask you. Grace brought it. Victoria didn't touch it. Another afternoon, she deliberately dropped a silk scarf. Grace picked it up. Victoria watched her. You're very comfortable here. I enjoy my work. That's not what I meant. Grace straightened. What did you mean? Victoria stepped closer. Don't confuse kindness with equality. Grace's expression changed. Victoria continued. Daniel has always been generous with employees. It doesn't mean anything. Grace's voice remained calm. I've never asked Mr. Hawthorne for anything. Not yet. Grace handed her the scarf. With respect, Miss Sinclair, if you have concerns about Mr. Hawthorne's decisions, perhaps you should discuss them with Mr. Hawthorne. Victoria stared. Grace walked away. Daniel had heard the final sentence. Victoria didn't know. He stepped from the adjoining hall. She's right. Victoria turned. Daniel, if you have something to say about me, say it to me. I was protecting you. From what? Victoria looked toward Grace. People who forget their place. Daniel's face hardened. Grace's place is wherever she earns the right to stand. And beside you? Daniel paused. That is none of your business. Victoria had her answer. That night, Daniel found Grace outside the greenhouse. You've been avoiding me. No. Grace. She sighed. I don't want trouble. You aren't causing any. Your friend clearly believes I am. Victoria doesn't decide who belongs in my life. Grace looked at him. But maybe she's saying what everyone else will think. I don't care what everyone else thinks. I do. Why? Because you can survive their judgment. Her voice cracked slightly. I could lose my job. Daniel became quiet. Grace continued. I have Maya, rent, school expenses, a life that doesn't have a safety net. I would never let this cost you your job. You can promise what you'll do. She looked toward the mansion. You can't promise what everyone else will do. Daniel stepped closer. You're right. Grace seemed surprised. He continued. I've spent most of my life assuming I can fix things because money usually gives me the power to. A sad smile. But I can't ask you to take risks simply because I'm protected from them. Grace looked at him. Thank you. Daniel nodded, then started walking away. Daniel? It was the first time she'd used his first name. He stopped. Grace almost apologized. Instead, she said, I didn't say I wanted you to stay away. Daniel turned. Grace's heart pounded. He walked back, slowly. Then what are you saying? I don't know. He smiled. For once, neither do I. Grace laughed softly. And then Daniel kissed her. Not dramatically, not urgently, carefully, as though asking a question. Grace answered by kissing him back. From an upstairs window, Victoria watched, and whatever restraint she'd had disappeared. Thought. The following morning, Victoria called someone. I need access to the East Corridor security schedule. The man on the phone hesitated. Why? Because I need to know which cameras aren't active. 2. Over the next several days, Daniel and Grace kept their distance publicly. But small things changed. Coffee appeared beside Grace's book. Notes appeared inside novels. 5-minute conversations became 15. One evening, Daniel told her about his mother. She loved libraries. Grace smiled. Now I know where you got it. She used to say a house without books was just an expensive shelter. I like her already. Daniel looked down. She would have liked you. Grace noticed the sadness. How long ago? 7 years. I'm sorry. Daniel nodded. She died unexpectedly. He stopped. Grace didn't push. Instead, she sat beside him. And that was exactly what Daniel remembered about her. She never forced pain to perform for her. 7 years earlier, she had done the same thing. But still, he didn't tell her. Not yet. Victoria's plan began with something small. A silver picture frame disappeared. It was found 2 days later in a linen cupboard Grace used. Margaret dismissed it. Then a pair of antique cufflinks vanished. They appeared inside a supply cabinet near Grace's cart. Nora joked. "Someone's losing everything lately." Grace didn't laugh. Something felt wrong. Then Victoria's bracelet disappeared. This time Victoria made a scene. "It was on my dresser." Margaret searched the room. Nothing. Grace helped. Victoria watched her. Finally, the bracelet was found beneath the bed. Probably fell. Margaret handed it back. Victoria looked directly at Grace. Probably. That evening, Grace told Daniel, "I think she wants people suspicious of me." Daniel's expression changed. "Has she accused you?" "No." "Then what happened?" Grace explained. Daniel listened. "I'll handle it." "No. Grace. If you confront her without proof, she'll say I'm turning you against her." Daniel hated that Grace was right. "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing." He frowned. "Nothing. For now." Daniel leaned back. "You are remarkably stubborn." "So I've been told." "By whom?" "Maya." "Frequently." Daniel smiled. "I'd like to meet her." Grace looked at him. "That sounds serious." "Maybe I am." Her smile disappeared. Daniel reached across the table. "Grace." She placed her hand in his. Neither noticed Victoria outside the partially open door. But Olivia did. And when she saw Victoria watching them, something in her sister's former friend frightened her. 2 days later, Victoria entered Daniel's mother's suite. The room had been preserved mostly as it was. She opened a velvet box. Inside lay Eleanor Hawthorne's diamond necklace. Victoria stared at it. Nearly $500,000. More importantly, priceless to Daniel. She lifted it. Olivia appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing?" Victoria spun around. "Nothing." "Put it back." Victoria's expression changed. "You're becoming a problem." Olivia stepped inside. "I know about the missing items." Victoria laughed. "You know nothing." "I know you." Victoria walked toward her. "I am trying to stop my best friend from making the biggest mistake of his life. By destroying Grace? Grace will recover. She could go to jail." Victoria said nothing. Olivia stared at the necklace. "No." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "What?" "I won't let you do this." Victoria moved closer. "Then you better decide whether you care more about some housekeeper you've known 3 months or the woman who's been your friend 20 years. Olivia looked at her. "Grace hasn't asked me to hurt anyone." She walked away. Victoria watched her go, then looked down at the necklace. Her plan had just become more dangerous. Because now she had a witness. That afternoon, Olivia tried to find Daniel. He had left for a board meeting. She called. No answer. Then she went looking for Grace. But Victoria got there first. "Mrs. Reynolds needs you in the conservatory." Grace looked up. "She does?" Immediately. Grace left the staff room. Victoria waited. Then entered. She found Grace's locker. Opened it. Reached for the brown handbag. What she didn't know was that 2 weeks earlier, Daniel's security team had installed a temporary camera in that corridor after several valuable items had gone missing. Victoria placed the necklace inside the bag, closed it, and walked away. But she wasn't entirely alone. Olivia had reached the end of the hallway just in time to see Victoria leaving the staff room. And 5 minutes later, she saw Grace return. Olivia's stomach dropped. "Grace." Grace turned. "Yes?" Olivia hesitated. She needed Daniel. She needed proof. "Have you seen my brother?" "Not since this morning." Olivia pulled out her phone. "Neither have I." Daniel was in a conference room downtown when his security director called. "Mr. Hawthorne, we have something you need to see." "Can it wait?" "I don't think so." Daniel stepped outside. His phone received a video. He pressed play. Victoria entered the staff room, opened Grace's locker, placed something inside her bag. Daniel replayed it. Once. Twice. His face changed. What did she put inside? "We don't know." Daniel called Margaret. "Where is Grace?" Working. Don't let her leave. Margaret heard something in his voice. Is she in trouble? No. Daniel looked through the conference room glass. But someone else is. Victoria didn't wait. Within an hour, she began shouting from the upstairs corridor. My necklace! Staff gathered. My necklace is gone. Margaret approached. Which necklace? Victoria's voice shook convincingly. Eleanor's diamond necklace. Daniel gave me permission to look at it. That was a lie. Who has been upstairs? Victoria looked around, then at Grace. Grace's stomach tightened. Margaret immediately noticed. No accusations. Then search everyone. Grace stared. Excuse me? If no one stole anything, no one should object. Daniel's car was already coming through the gates. Victoria knew she had minutes. She pointed toward the staff room. Search the lockers. Margaret refused. We will wait for Mr. Hawthorne. Victoria raised her voice. $500,000 is missing. Employees began whispering. Grace felt eyes turning toward her. Then Victoria said, Grace was in Eleanor's suite yesterday. I was cleaning. Of course. Grace looked at Margaret. I didn't take anything. I know. But Grace heard the uncertainty around her. Not from Margaret. From everyone else. And suddenly 4 years of fighting to be seen as trustworthy felt as though it could disappear in seconds. Victoria stepped closer. Open your bag. No. Everyone turned. Grace swallowed. Not because I stole anything, because you don't get to humiliate me simply because you think you can. Victoria smiled. Then perhaps we should call the police. A car door slammed outside. Daniel entered. That's enough. Everyone became silent. Victoria turned. Daniel. Thank God. Your mother's necklace. I heard. Daniel's gaze moved to Grace. She looked terrified. He wanted to tell her immediately. I know. But his security director had sent another message. Need her to reveal exactly what she planted. Keep her talking. Daniel understood. If he accused Victoria before the necklace was produced, she might claim the video showed her putting something innocent in Grace's bag. He needed the trap complete. So he did something Grace didn't expect. Open the bag. Her face fell. Daniel? His chest tightened. Please. Grace stared at him. For the first time since meeting him, she felt completely alone. Slowly, she walked to her locker. 20 people followed. Grace took out the bag. Her hands trembled. She opened it, reached inside, and froze. Cold metal touched her fingers. No. She pulled out the necklace. Gasps filled the room. Victoria covered her mouth. Grace stared at Daniel. I didn't. Her voice disappeared. Victoria whispered, Oh my God. Grace shook her head. I didn't put this there. Daniel didn't move. Grace, you believe me, right? He wanted to cross the room. Instead, he forced himself to remain still. Daniel. Tears filled her eyes. Tell them. Victoria stepped forward. This is devastating. Daniel finally looked at her. Yes. His voice became ice. It is. Victoria misunderstood. I warned you. Daniel walked toward Grace. Give me the necklace. Grace placed it in his hand. Her fingers were shaking. Am I fired? Daniel looked into her eyes. No. Victoria's smile vanished. Grace blinked. What? Daniel turned toward the security director. Play it. A monitor on the wall came alive. The video began. Victoria entering the staff room. Victoria opening Grace's locker. Victoria removing the necklace from her pocket. Victoria putting it inside Grace's bag. No one spoke. Victoria's face drained of color. Grace stared at the screen. Then at Daniel. You knew? I knew before I arrived. Grace's tears fell. Victoria stepped backward. This isn't what it looks like. Daniel turned. What exactly does it look like, Victoria? She's manipulating you. So you framed her for felony theft? I was protecting you. From a woman who has done nothing except work hard and treat everyone in this house with dignity? Victoria's composure shattered. She doesn't belong here. Daniel's voice dropped. You're right. Everyone froze. Grace looked at him. Daniel continued, "She doesn't belong standing here being humiliated by someone who believes money makes her superior." He stepped toward Victoria. "You will leave my home." "Daniel. Now. You're choosing her?" "No." He looked at Grace. "I'm choosing what is right." Victoria laughed bitterly. "You'll regret this." Daniel's expression didn't change. "The only thing I regret is allowing you enough access to hurt someone I care about." Victoria looked around. No allies. No escape. She walked toward the door, then stopped beside Grace. "This doesn't make you one of them." Grace wiped her tears. "No." She looked at Victoria. "It makes me someone you couldn't destroy." Victoria left. The doors closed. Grace stood silently. Daniel turned to the staff. "Everyone back to work, please." No one argued. Soon only Daniel, Grace, Margaret, and Olivia remained. Olivia stepped forward. "Grace, I'm sorry." Grace looked at her. "You knew?" "I suspected. I tried to reach Daniel." Daniel turned. "You saw her?" Olivia nodded. "I should have told Grace immediately." Grace shook her head. "You told the truth when it mattered." Olivia hugged her, then left. Margaret followed. Grace and Daniel were alone. Grace looked at him. "You let me think you believed I stole it." Daniel's expression changed. "I know." "Why?" "I needed Victoria to complete the accusation so she couldn't explain away the video." "You could have warned me." "Yes." He didn't defend himself. Grace appreciated that and hated it at the same time. "You hurt me." "I know. I looked at you and thought the one person I trusted had decided I was exactly what she said I was." Daniel stepped closer. "I made the wrong choice." Grace looked surprised. "I was trying to protect the evidence. I should have protected you." Silence. "I am sorry." Grace wiped her face. "I need to go home." "Grace. Please." Daniel stopped. She walked away. And for the first time since Grace entered Hawthorne House, Daniel wondered whether his attempt to save her had cost him the one thing he couldn't buy back: her trust. Grace didn't return the following morning. She called Margaret. "I need a day. Take 2. I don't want anyone thinking." "Grace." Margaret's voice softened. "No one thinks anything except that you were treated terribly." Grace closed her eyes. "Thank you." Maya found her sitting on the couch. "You're not going?" "Not today." Maya sat beside her. Grace told her everything. When she finished, Maya was furious. "He knew?" "Yes." "And didn't tell you?" "He thought he needed the proof." "That's stupid." Grace almost smiled. "He admitted that." "Good." Maya crossed her arms. "Billionaires should still have common sense." Grace laughed despite herself. Then Maya became serious. "Do you love him?" Grace looked down. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." Grace's eyes filled. "That doesn't mean I know what to do." Maya rested her head on Grace's shoulder. "Mom used to say forgiveness and trust aren't the same thing." Grace looked at her. "You remember that?" "I remember more than you think." "So do I." So Daniel didn't call. He didn't send flowers. He didn't arrive at her apartment. He gave her space. On the second evening, there was a knock. Grace opened the door. Margaret stood there, holding an envelope. "If that's from Daniel." "It isn't." Grace frowned. Margaret handed it to her. "It's from Eleanor Hawthorne." Grace stared. "Daniel's mother?" "Yes. She died 7 years ago." "I know." Grace opened the envelope. Inside was an old newspaper clipping. A photograph showed Daniel outside St. Matthew's Hospital. The headline: "Hotel Heir Loses Mother After Sudden Aneurysm." Grace looked confused. Then she saw the date: October 14, 7 years earlier. Something moved in her memory. Hospital lights. A vending machine. A man sitting alone. Blood on his shirt from trying to hold his mother's hand during emergency treatment. Grace stopped breathing. "No." Margaret smiled sadly. "You remember." Grace sat down. 7 years earlier, Grace's mother had been receiving chemotherapy at St. Matthew's. Grace had gone downstairs for coffee. She had found a young man sitting alone in the corridor. He looked destroyed. Grace didn't know who he was. She didn't ask. She simply sat beside him. For nearly 40 minutes. At one point he whispered, "I wasn't there when she called." Grace remembered answering, "You're here now." He said, "What if it's too late?" Grace had looked at him. Love isn't measured by the last 5 minutes. It's measured by all the days before them. She had forgotten the conversation. Daniel hadn't. Grace looked at Margaret. He knew? From the first day. Why didn't he tell me? He wanted you to know him without feeling you owed him anything. Grace covered her mouth. Margaret continued. Daniel's mother died that night. Grace's eyes closed. He told me years later that a stranger kept him from falling apart. Margaret smiled. That stranger was you. Sut. Grace returned to Hawthorne House the following morning. Daniel was in the library. He turned when she entered. Neither spoke at first. Then Grace placed the newspaper clipping on the table. Daniel closed his eyes. Margaret. She thought I should know. She was right. Grace walked closer. You remembered me for 7 years? Yes. Why didn't you say anything? Because when you walked into this house, you needed a job. He looked at her. You didn't need another wealthy person making you feel indebted. Grace's eyes softened. So you just watched. At first. And then? Daniel smiled faintly. Then you ruined everything. Grace almost laughed. How? I started looking forward to seeing you. He stepped closer. I started changing meetings so I'd be home when you were working in the library. I knew it. You did not. I suspected. I bought 3 copies of books I already owned because I needed excuses to talk to you. Grace laughed through her tears. Daniel continued. And then somewhere along the way, the woman I remembered from the worst night of my life became the woman I wanted beside me for the rest of it. Grace stopped laughing. Daniel's voice softened. But I hurt you. Yes. I can't undo that. No. I can only promise that next time protecting you means trusting you with the truth. Grace looked at him for a long time. Next time? If you'll give me one. She stepped closer. I can give you a next time. Daniel exhaled. But, he waited. No more secret plans involving me. Agreed. No treating me like I'm fragile. Agreed. And if another $500,000 necklace ends up in my bag, I'll tell you before we gather an audience. Grace laughed. Daniel smiled. Then she kissed him. And this time there were no windows hiding enemies. No whispered judgments. No uncertainty. Just 2 people who had somehow found each other twice. There. 6 months later, Grace stood in front of a building with tears in her eyes. The sign had been covered. Daniel stood beside her. Maya bounced impatiently. Can we reveal it? Grace laughed. Wait. Children and families gathered behind them. Samuel Alvarez stood in the front row. Margaret and Olivia were nearby. Daniel handed Grace the rope. This is yours. Grace shook her head. Ours. No. He smiled. Yours. Grace pulled. The covering dropped. The Eleanor and Helen Community Library. Grace covered her mouth. Her mother's name. Helen. Beside Daniel's mother. She looked at him. You added Mom. You told me once that books gave you somewhere to go when life became too heavy. Daniel looked toward the children. Now other kids will have somewhere too. Grace cried. Maya hugged her. Mom would be so proud. Grace looked at the building. For years she'd believed survival was the dream. Pay the rent. Keep the lights on. Get Maya through school. Make it to Friday. Then Monday. Then another month. She had become so accustomed to surviving that she'd forgotten life could contain more than survival. Inside, hundreds of books waited. Reading rooms, free tutoring, computers, scholarships, a children's corner with bright windows. Samuel approached. Remember what I told you? Grace smiled. Never decide I'm unqualified before someone has the chance to meet me. Exactly. Grace hugged him. You changed my life. Samuel shook his head. I gave you an address. He pointed toward Daniel. You did the rest. Daniel joined them. Samuel looked between them. Although I didn't predict all of this. Grace laughed. Neither did I. Maya whispered. I did. Everyone laughed. Thin. 1 year later, Maya opened an envelope at the kitchen table. Not the old kitchen. Grace and Maya had moved. Nothing enormous. Nothing extravagant. Just a warm home with sunlight, enough bedrooms, and a refrigerator Grace no longer feared opening. Maya screamed. Grace ran in. What? I got in. Grace froze. Maya handed her the letter. Full scholarship. University. Grace read it twice, then started crying. We did it. Maya shook her head. You did it. No. Grace pulled her close. We did. Daniel stood in the doorway carrying groceries. What happened? Maya ran toward him. I got the scholarship. Daniel dropped the bags and hugged her. I told you. Grace watched them. This was the life she'd been trying to build. Not wealth. Not mansions. Security. Love. People who stayed. 2. Later that evening, Daniel took Grace back to the library. The estate library. The place where they'd first really talked. A fire burned quietly. Grace looked around. Why are we here? Daniel handed her a book. She smiled. Our book. The one you claimed you'd read 3 times. I had. Still suspicious. Grace opened it. A small hollow had been cut into the pages. Inside was a ring. Grace froze. Daniel lowered himself to one knee. Oh my God. Grace Bennett. She covered her mouth. 7 years ago, you sat beside a stranger when he was living through the worst night of his life. His voice shook. You asked for nothing. Grace was crying. Years later, you walked into my home and somehow taught me the same lesson again. Daniel looked at her. That kindness matters when no one's watching. That love isn't about saving someone. It's about standing beside them. And home isn't the place with the biggest walls. His eyes filled. It's the person you don't want to face life without. Grace sobbed. Daniel smiled. So before I turn this into an entire speech, yes. He laughed. I haven't asked. Yes. Grace. She dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around him. Yes. He laughed against her shoulder. I was supposed to say, will you marry me? Then say it. Daniel pulled back. Will you marry me? Grace smiled through her tears. Yes. From behind the library door came a muffled scream. Grace turned. Maya. The door opened. Maya, Margaret, Olivia, Nora and Samuel stumbled into the room. Grace stared. You were all listening? Maya shrugged. We needed to make sure he did it right. Daniel stood. Apparently, I had an evaluation committee. You passed, Margaret said. Everyone laughed. Grace looked around at them. Family. Not the kind she had been born with entirely. The kind life had slowly built around her. And suddenly she understood something her mother used to say. Sometimes a closed door isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it forces you down the hallway toward the door that was meant for you. Grace had thought Hawthorne House saved her. It hadn't. The job helped. Daniel loved her. Margaret believed in her. Samuel opened a door, but Grace had been saving herself long before any of them appeared. Every morning she got up when she wanted to stay in bed. Every application she submitted after hearing no. Every meal she divided so Maya could eat. Every bill she faced. Every disappointment she survived without allowing it to turn her cruel. Those were the steps that brought her here. Not luck. Not a billionaire. Not a mansion. Grace. 2 years later, a young woman stood nervously inside the Eleanor and Helen Community Library. Grace noticed her near the reception desk. She wore an old coat and held a resume. Can I help you? The woman looked embarrassed. I heard you might be hiring. Grace smiled. We might. I don't have much experience. That doesn't always tell me who someone is. The woman looked confused. Grace gestured toward a chair. Sit. The woman did. Grace sat across from her. What made you apply? The young woman looked down. My son. Grace became still. He's 6. The woman continued. It's just us. I've been looking for work everywhere. I know I don't have the strongest resume, but I'm dependable. I learn quickly. I just need someone to give me a chance. Grace remembered another room. Another interview. Another woman asking her the same question. What kind of employee would you be if nobody were watching? The young woman thought. The same kind I'd be if everybody was watching. Grace smiled. Why? Because my son watches me. Grace felt tears threaten. The young woman quickly added, I'm sorry. Was that the wrong answer? No. Grace smiled. It might be exactly the right one. Outside the glass office, Daniel waited with Maya. Maya was home from college for the weekend. She watched Grace talking to the applicant. She reminds me of someone. Daniel smiled. Me too. Inside, Grace closed the resume. Can you start Monday? The young woman stared at her. Are you serious? I am. Tears immediately filled her eyes. You're giving me the job? I'm giving you an opportunity. The woman covered her face. Thank you. Grace reached across the desk. Don't thank me yet. She smiled. Show me what you can do. I will. I believe you. The woman stopped. Perhaps those 3 words meant more than Grace realized. Or perhaps Grace knew exactly how much they meant. Because once, she had needed someone to say them to her. That evening, Grace stood outside the library as the sun disappeared behind the buildings. Daniel joined her. You hired her. I did. You're sure? No. Daniel laughed. Grace leaned against him. But someone was sure about me once. They watched the lights inside the library turn on. Children sat beside shelves. A mother read to her daughter. A teenager worked at a computer. An elderly man turned the page of a newspaper. Life happening quietly. Grace smiled. You know what the strangest part is? What? I spent so many years thinking I needed someone to rescue me. Daniel looked at her. And? I didn't. He smiled. No. I needed an opportunity. Grace took his hand. And people willing to believe I could do something with it. Daniel kissed her forehead. You did. Grace looked through the window at the young woman she'd just hired. No. She smiled. We did. And perhaps that's what kindness really is. Not changing someone's life for them. Not becoming their hero. Not expecting gratitude. Sometimes kindness is simply holding a door open long enough for someone who's been fighting their entire life to finally walk through it. Grace Bennett walked through hers. And years later, when she had every reason to close it behind her, she held it open for someone else. Because money can build beautiful houses. Success can open impressive doors. And power can make people listen. But none of those things determine the true measure of a person. That is revealed in the moments when nobody is applauding. When there is nothing to gain. When someone weaker than you needs compassion. When telling the truth costs something. When you have the power to humiliate someone and choose dignity instead. Victoria Sinclair believed status determined where people belonged. Grace learned something better. Character does. And the housekeeper everyone thought was lucky to enter the billionaire's world eventually discovered that the greatest thing she brought into Hawthorne House wasn't her work ethic. It wasn't loyalty. And it wasn't even the kindness Daniel remembered from that hospital corridor. It was the reminder that no matter how successful people become, everyone still needs the same things. To be seen, to be respected, to be trusted, and to be loved for who they are when all the titles disappear. So if you're watching this while you're going through a season where every door seems to be closing, remember grace. A rejection isn't always a verdict. A difficult chapter isn't the entire story. And where you are today does not determine where you'll stand tomorrow. Keep going. Keep your character when life gives you reasons to become bitter. And never let someone else's opinion of your worth become your own. Because sometimes, the opportunity that changes everything is waiting just beyond the day you almost decided to give up. And sometimes, the person you're becoming through the struggle is even more important than the destination you're fighting to reach. If Grace's story touched your heart, tell us in the comments, do you think Grace should have forgiven Daniel after he allowed the accusation to play out, even though he knew she was innocent? And if you believe kindness still matters in this world, leave a heart in the comments. Share this story with someone who might need the reminder today that one difficult season doesn't define an entire life. And subscribe for more powerful stories about love, family, betrayal, second chances, and the moments that change ordinary lives forever. Until next time, remember, never underestimate the person who's quietly fighting battles you know nothing about. Their next chapter may surprise everyone.